Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Fitness Education Series produced by the Australian Fitness Academy. It's like progressive overload for your brain. I'm your host, Tom Rock, and today's episode I'm going to touch on maximizing athletic performance, but also why it's important, why these concepts can be important, or why these concepts can be very useful for just general population or general clients as well. And it's things we've sort of touched on throughout some episodes of this podcast previously, in terms of maximizing athletic performance. Like there's a good episode on periodization, which I'll link in the description below, that you can go back and listen to. All sorts of things. But in terms of our general population, usually their goals are around either muscle gain or fat loss, or potentially some sort of cardiovascular fitness goal if they're going to do a fun run or a triathlon or something like that, improving their general cardiovascular health. But it generally comes down to weight loss or muscle gain for the general population clients. Athletic performance and maximizing athletic performance can be a little bit different. Again, we have the same tools. We're still using resistance training. We're still using cardiovascular training. We just use slightly different, planning methods or methods to our planning, such as periodization. We might, probably the main difference, and again, it depends on the sport. So with athletic development and maximizing athletic performance, that's going to look different from a football player to a cricket player, for example. So while they're all using gym equipment and training in the gym, the idea of maximizing performance is going to look different depending on the sport. What a lot of sports generally have is a power-based component, or the ability to produce force quickly. So things like whether it's box jumps or broad jumps or single leg hops are really important to get into the program, because these are skills and actions that the athlete is going to have to perform in their sport, and that may be the difference between winning or losing, or beating an opponent. Things like change of direction or agility are going to become important for athlete performance. So when you look at their cardiovascular training, obviously they have to do some long, slow distance stuff, but they also need to do some agility work and agility drills and change that and increase their capacity to change direction quickly. Which, when you look at breaking that down, you have to look at improving their ability to absorb force quickly, but then also their ability to explode and produce force quickly after that. So utilizing the stretch shortening cycle and becoming strong eccentrically is important. But all this, and then you can look at like tendon stiffness and all this stuff. You need to look at maximizing performance and reducing the risk of injury as well. So there's a lot of thought that goes into a program that maximizes athletic performance. And it can be tough to fit all these things in, which is why periodization is important, because we focus on certain aspects at certain times and build things into a program when it's most important, or after we've got the baseline of fitness, we can start to work on these things like eccentric force, absorbing eccentric force and being able to jump or land safely and explosively, or change direction quickly. So this is all stuff that needs to be programmed. So where you fit that in, is it in at the end of a strength and like a resistance session? Is it their conditioning session? How do we fit in their plyometric exercises around hypertrophy? All this thing needs to be taken into account. So it's probably a bit much for the scope of the podcast to discuss all these different aspects of athlete performance, but I think it's an important concept to bring into some general population clients as well, because it's very easy, even with my own training and maybe your own training in general, it's easy to get stuck in resistance training and hypertrophy training, and the main exercises, whether it's squat, bench press, squat, bench, deadlift, it could be chin-ups, shoulder press, split squats, whatever it is. We do all these general common exercises, which are really, really good for hypertrophy and in building muscle mass. But there's other things like change direction, or the ability to produce force quickly, so power, is also important in everyday life. If we ever want to go for a run, or we're doing something, we've all of a sudden got to jump down a ledge, or jump over a step, or jump over a log, or change direction. Something happens, we've got to quickly get out of the way. All these things happen in everyday life. Or you're playing with kids and you need to get up and down off the floor, or you're dodging around things. All this stuff happens, and as we get older, if we don't expose ourselves to these things as regularly as we used to, we start to lose that ability. So things that we probably used to do a lot, even if you did play sport, you played footy or tennis or netball um, as you were growing up or in your early 20s, um, you're still doing this on a weekly basis. You're changing direction, using agility, all this sort of stuff, power, jumping. You're doing it weekly. If we stop doing that and do that less regularly throughout our 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, we start to lose that ability, and our muscles, if we're not doing it, our muscles aren't going to be trained for it. So I think some really important concepts to take from athlete development to keep into our program as we move away from when we're not playing as much sport potentially, is to keep those muscle stiffness, keep that ability to produce force quickly. It's also going to help our ability to absorb force, which is going to help us reduce the chance of falling. It's going to reduce the chance of reduce the risk of injury when we're just doing general everyday things. So, in terms of helping this functionality, I think trying to fit, even if it's a general population who says, I just want to get fitter, whether it's lose weight or build muscle, a big aspect of fitness is still to produce power or absorb force. So, box jumps are obviously a potentially controversial exercise because obviously they do come with some inherent risk, but there's definitely safer options for box jumps. There's smaller boxes. Start with learning to absorb force and and learning to land, potentially if you haven't done it for a long time. And these things are quite intense. So whether you're doing jumps or hops or landing, anything explosive and sort of maximal is quite intense. So you need to start off small and make sure your client would start off small and have a base built first of relative strength. But little drills like single leg hops, side to side hops, skaters, all these things can help improve our ability to produce force, and absorb force, and these are skills that we potentially lose throughout our life. So trying to fit these into just a general program, someone who's looking to just increase their general fitness, I see this as a big part of general fitness, and sort of maintaining that quality of life as we age. So having some aspect of little plyometric exercise, little jumps, hops, bringing them slowly into the program once the client is able is really important. So there's lots of these cool concepts out there in the athlete performance and maximizing athlete performance style of training that I think relates really well to general pop. So don't be afraid to keep learning, continue to learn, find out what these guys are doing, get some examples of drills. There's lots of information online. There's lots of short courses these days, but lots of little, whether it's interval running drill, whether it's change direction drills, whether it's some mini sort of plyometric or ankle stiffness drills. What sort of plyometric stuff can you fit into the initial phase of a program after a warm-up or on a separate day just before your client goes for a run? What sort of things can we put into our programs to help maintain or develop these sort of springy muscles, these springy joints to help us deal with the different changes in everyday life? So I think that's just a little sort of concept on my thoughts on where maximizing athlete performance, you actually learn a lot from what those coaches and strength and conditioning coaches can implement, and then transfer that into a general population sort of program, and you can get some really good results. Plus, they're also fun. So you just got, I guess, the thing you got to be careful about is making sure you're not building these into a program too early for a client who's not ready, as they can be maximal efforts. So, and they do, whether it's force absorption, they're quite intense. So building up some sort of resilience to exercise in general is important before you do this. But I think there's definitely, like every exercise, there's always progressions and regressions. So you don't have to go straight to a box jump or straight to a drop jump. There's lots of little progressions on the way. So learning these little progressions and getting these into a program is really good. They can be super fun and enjoyable too. So it's trying to fit them in because clients will enjoy them and they'll see benefit from them. They'll move well and feel better, but it's just getting them in at the right time, at the right intensity is important. But yeah, something to potentially play around with in your training too. Guys, if you're not doing too much jumping, landing, change of direction, skipping, hopping, all these skills that we inherently sort of start to lose as we age, keeping them in our fitness routine helps keep that ability, keep our body maintaining that ability, which is really important. Anyway, guys, I hope you got a bit out of that episode and my thoughts on that. If you do have any questions in regards to this, please email tom@afa.com.au or comment below. I'm definitely happy to answer any questions, do any follow-up podcasts, or if you've got any other topics you want me to discuss or questions you want me to answer, shoot them through as well, guys. More than happy to chat about whatever you guys would like to hear. Other than that, have a great weekend, and I'll talk to you all soon.